Hey everyone, welcome to another AI update. I'm your host Chris McKay, and along with Richard Banfield, we'll be reviewing the most important AI stories this week. We have a lot to cover, so let's dive in.
Chris, good to see you again. It
Hey
is
Richard.
another week of big news. Maginative is going to cover that news. We've also got the premium subscriptions, which anybody who's watching can jump on. You're not getting everything you want now, and you need to up the calories of information that you're receiving from Maginative. That's where to go. Cool. Let's start with the big story. So, a little kitty cat arrived. It's called La Chat or Le Chat. In French, that would be little cat or small or the cat. But Mistral has announced that it's got a new language model and a new chatbot.
My friends from France would be so disappointed this week. I released a video and I didn't consult them for pronunciation. So this time I'm going to ensure that I get my pronunciations right, or at least better.
Good. The other big stories are Apple has decided not to go ahead with its car project. It's canceled that, and it's decided to reallocate those resources to AI. So very exciting for AI, not so exciting for people who want yet another car on the roads, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
And then the other big story was that Elon Musk seems like he's absolutely bent on distracting everybody again. Maybe he just wants to be in the news. Maybe this is a legitimate reason to, kind of change the direction of Sam Altman's plans. But he is suing Sam Altman.
Yeah, this broke yesterday. There will be a lot for us to unpack with this story, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's start with the Mistral story. I think that's a good one to start. This is a pretty impressive model, right?
It is. I remember seeing Mistral last September when the company debuted, and they made a big splash because they released a magnet link. And for those that don't know, a magnet link is basically a link to a torrent to download a file. And within that file, they released all the weights that was needed for their first Mistral 7 bead model. It was super impressive. It set the open source AI community on fire, and everyone loved just the culture of Mistral and what they represented. It was an alternative to Llama, and it was competing against all the big players. In December, they released Mistral. It was a mixture of experts model, and that was a new architecture. Again, they were pushing the boundaries of innovation, and the open source community really felt like they had a company that was on their side, that was behind them. And for France as a country, investing in a sovereign AI platform, it was really impressive. But this week, they released an even better model, Mistral Large. And this model is only second to GPT-4. So it even outperforms Gemini. And so you think of Google with all their resources and not being able to compete against a startup like Mistral. That's really impressive on their part. But the bad news, it's no longer open sourced. They don't seem to be aligned with the open source community. According to the founder, Arthur Minch, they released the initial models really to gain traction. So a huge loss for the open source community. But for Mistral, of course, they're celebrating. They inked a new partnership with Microsoft, with IBM.
They've
So
been
they're
busy.
doing great.
Yeah, busy
Yeah.
week for them.
Yeah, it's impressive that Microsoft has been able to ink a deal now to get exclusive distribution rights for Mistral and also with OpenAI. And the question I ask is, where is Amazon? Where is Google? Why aren't they out there inking relationships with these new startup labs?
Yeah, you wonder whether that's just a strategy issue, right? Maybe Google and Amazon like to keep this stuff indoors. Maybe they don't see M&A as a way of moving forward or growing. We'll find out soon enough. It looks like Microsoft's general approach of the last couple of years has been M&A, acquisition being their primary way to account for R&D and innovation, whereas these other companies like Google and Amazon tend to prefer their innovation to happen inside the organization. So we'll just have to keep an eye on this and see who gets who, because there are a lot of cool startups out there.
Yeah, there's also one other angle to this story that we need to touch on. The EU is actually scrutinizing this deal because once they saw Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI, they really wanted to ensure that the big players were not taking advantage of startups and buying them out or over-investing in them to create a monopoly.
Yeah.
And so Microsoft invested $16 million in this deal. It gives them roughly 1% of the company, but still you'll have regulators keeping a very close eye on this deal.
Yeah, they've learned their lessons from the past. We also know that the EU antitrust regulators are not quite as powerful as the local US regulators. And we also know that the US regulators haven't really been putting their foot down on antitrust over the last probably the last decade, really. So, yeah, we'll have to watch that one and see just what the regulators do with this. But I think you're right. I think they've maybe just raised a flag and said, "We're watching you. We've got an eye on
Exactly.
you. Don't step over the boundaries here." Cool. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening in AI tech in general. We've got a new tool from Adobe, which is interesting because they've already got a big suite. Why would they add yet another tool to the suite or the Creative Cloud?
So this is a very exciting preview. They announced earlier this week a new tool that allows you to use AI to generate music, but also to edit that music. And so just using a prompt, you can translate and change things like the tone and the pacing. You can do in-painting and out-painting.
I heard you got a new project cooking up.
Yeah, I've been working on some music co-creation with precise control. I can take an input melody that sounds like this, and then you can generate the accompaniment, in this case, some film music.
That's cool. That's just from a prompt?
Yeah. Do you want to hear something else?
Yeah, let's do hip hop.
All right, one sec.
I think Adobe's strategy here is to look at what creators are needing in the marketplace. And so if you think of a decade, 2 decades ago, they were all about the Photoshops and the Illustrators of the world, because those were the tools that the market demanded. In the creator economy today, where you're thinking of podcasts and video content, you're seeing where they're starting to dip their toes in these arenas. And this is a tool that it looks fun. I can't wait to see it in production. If you think of adding something as simple as stock music to a video and having to find the right length, and now with AI, you can simply extend it to the length that you want and it will generate additional music for you. That's brilliant. So exciting move by Adobe, and it will be interesting to see how it integrates with their existing tools. Their strategy so far has been to not introduce new applications, but to take the features and embed it within the apps and tools that people are already using.
Yeah, and you start to see, especially with a tool like this, that they're appealing to those creators, the TikTokers, the YouTubers, but obviously mainstream. Early on, we saw a lot of apps being able to do this, mobile-only apps. Now we're starting to see a full generation of desktop apps focused on creators. If I was a mid-level person within the marketing team, I'd actually be pretty nervous about my job because a lot of those creative things are now being done by AI. So it's time to upskill. This is really not a cautionary note for, hey, AI is stealing your job, but mostly like find out what these tools are, get acquainted with them, start using them, whatever the case may be for your organization, just start using them because it's coming and it's coming quickly.
Exactly.
Similar to that, we also saw a really cool app coming out of Alibaba, which is called Emo. Not sure what Emo stands for. Do you know what the EMO stands for?
It stands for emote, profile, something another. I don't remember the full definition, but it's not as cool as emoji. But you have to just look at this model and take a moment to appreciate where we are in AI acceleration and progress. Basically, what Emo does, you can take an audio source, like maybe some dialogue, and you take an image, and it puts them together, and it creates a talking head or a singing head video.
When I was a kid, I feel like you heard the term, don't cry. You don't need to cry. Crying is the most beautiful thing you can do. I encourage people to cry. I cry all the time, and I think it's the most healthy expression of how you're feeling. And I sometimes wish I just could have been told, you can cry. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in how you're feeling. And also, you don't need to always be justifying it, because I think I was constantly trying to come up with reasons why rather than just being accepted for what it was.
You have done nothing but tell me how bored you were. I was the chore, the job you didn't want to do. To me, you were everything.
Dress up as Mary Todd Lincoln and help me win this presidency, or you can pack your things and leave. There's the door.
My God, I love your skirt. Where did you get it? Vintage. So adorable. My God, I love your skirt. Where did you get it? Vintage. So adorable.
I am outraged by this. I'm absolutely disgusted.
정진 난만 정승 가련 새짐 한적 이젠 찢어나 귀찮아 매일 뭐해 어디야 밥은 짜자 baby 자기 여보 보고 싶어 다 부질없어.
But it's not just about the lip sync with emo. It's how it's able to capture the emotions and the facial expressions and even movement. And you're going to 100% see this technology being rolled out in the text to video marketplace. And so expect tools like Sora and Stable Video to have audio in the future that can have realistic lip movements and emotions based on what is being said.
That's right. And in fact, we've got a guest coming up soon, Trip Clements, who's a movie maker, filmmaker. He's going to be talking about how they're going to be using these new tools to both prototype those kinds of things for other long form movies and films and documentaries, but also what's changing overall in the movie industry. So watch this space. We'll start with our guests probably next week. Qualcomm also got something new. What are they doing? This is a big announcement at Mobile World Congress.
What Qualcomm is doing, they're looking to use AI to create easier connectivity within devices. And so your Qualcomm chips are in most smartphones. They're your 5G chips in your smartphone devices. And they're doing a lot with Bluetooth connectivity. So as you move around the world with 5G technology, they're hoping to ensure that you can transition from device to device in a much more seamless way. And they're integrating AI along the way. So excited to see what they ultimately end up delivering on the consumer side. But again, you're seeing Intel, AMD, ARM, NVIDIA, all of these companies are operating at different parts of the ecosystem, and they're all working to improve how generative AI is being delivered at the cloud level, but also at the device level on the edge.
Probably one of the most interesting stories that came out this week was Microsoft has now launched Copilot for finance. So what we're seeing here is a very specific application of Copilot for a very specific vertical. But we've seen this before from them, right? So are we seeing, is this really just a marketing bundling story, or is this very specific models for very specific audiences?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. And I think it's a brilliant strategy from Microsoft. You're seeing where they're bringing Copilot to the people, where they're using their tools for very specific use cases. I think this is how you're going to gain adoption right now. Right. If you try to bring a broad new tool like a ChatGPT into a finance department, maybe they'll use it, maybe there'll be some uptake. But if you can bring a tool and it's integrated into the spreadsheets that they're using, into the different platforms that they're already integrated with, that is fine-tuned for finance, that changes the game. And what Microsoft has done brilliantly with their branding of Copilot is to say, hey, we'll give you Copilot for sales. We'll give you Copilot for service, and no, we'll give you Copilot for finance. And it's the same Microsoft Copilot 365, but fine-tuned for these different departments and services. And I think it's going to be a strategy that ends up benefiting them really well.
Yeah, very interesting. I think you're right. You know, generic solutions tend to be seen as novelties, whereas very specific solutions tend to be adopted more quickly. So I think you're right. It's a marketing story, but it's also a very smart way to get adoption happening. Looking forward to seeing what Google does with its platform as well, because the workplace needs a similar kind of idea. So as somebody who doesn't really like that many cars on the road, I like a walkable city. I like a place where I can avoid kill boxes on the road when I'm riding my bike or when I'm out on the street with my kids. Apple has decided that they don't need to put another car, whether it's electric or not, on the road, and they've decided to shift all those resources over to generative AI. Specifically, the 2,000 people that are on the Apple Car project, they will now be working and upskilled and changing their roles for this specific project, this generative AI project. Can you tell us a little bit more about why and what's the point of that? Like, it seems good for a consumer like me that I don't need another car, but how do we benefit from that?
So, Richard, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. By the way, I remember you'd send these city plans of rideable cities and walkable cities that I'd always enjoy. But, I think the writing has been on the wall for the Apple Project Titan, as they called it, for some time now. They've really struggled to retain talent within the project. But to your point, I do believe you're now seeing a shift in focus from Apple to recognize that, hey, generative AI, there is a big opportunity there. And you're seeing Tim Cook on the earnings call this week. He's even promising that they're going to break new ground in AI. And I think it's important for them to signal to their shareholders, to their investors, that there is more opportunity coming from Apple, and for them to shutter a project that they have invested billions of dollars in. It really goes to show you the value that they're putting on generative AI.
Yeah.
And for companies that are still on the fence, wondering whether AI is just a fad or it's something that is going to disappear, I think you're starting to see enough evidence from the big giants that are investing a lot in terms of human resources and capital resources that this is a big deal.
Yeah. And, a few $1 billion for Apple is not a lot of money. There are, $3 trillion business. There's a joke that, what's the difference between $1 billion and $1 trillion? Well, the difference is about $1 trillion. So, yeah, I think they can afford to do this. I'm not sure everybody can afford to make these kinds of bets, but certainly both Amazon and Apple have shown that the path to innovation has been to go after certain sectors, try new things, make big bets, and be willing to fail. And I think that's a really positive sign. If I'm an investor of, full disclosure, I have Apple shares. I'm excited by that because I do want to see them taking bets on the future.
Yeah. And I want you to talk a little bit more, Richard, on how you see a decision like this affecting them in terms of their environmental stance, because I think you touched on a point that many people don't dive deeper into, but I do think not focusing on another car solution is a pretty strategic move also.
Yeah, I think what most people miss is when they see that an electric car is going to be created as a replacement for a fossil burning car, they get excited. The not so obvious thing is it's still a car. It still requires space. A lot of cities are planned around cars. In fact, there are some ridiculous numbers that would blow people's minds. Like there have to be, in some cities, 6 parking places per car, and that's not including your driveway. So that means that those huge, big swaths of parking lots, the big, multi-lane highways that you see, all your taxpayer money that goes into that, and of course the environmental impact of that, the reflection, the heat. A lot of this stuff actually heats up cities, and in cities where they reduce the size of the streets, they reduce the number of the cars on the streets, able to then plant trees, you're seeing a significant drop in the temperatures around those cities. Paris and Barcelona being probably the most famous of those. But really, we don't need another car. What we need is an alternative to these modes of transport or these modes of communication. So I think that's the key thing here, is that Apple may not have thought about this through that lens, but it's certainly a factor that we're all going to benefit from.
Yeah, I love that.
Cool. Let's turn our attention a little bit to data. There's obviously, we spoke about this last week. These models don't exist without data. You've got to feed them something. We saw a great deal being inked last week. Reddit being approached by Google. I think it was a $60 million deal. Is that correct? Per year?
Yep.
Now Google has approached Stack Overflow with a similar kind of deal where they get access to their content. And really, the thing that strikes me here is not only are they after the content, but they're really signaling this particular audience. This audience is primarily creators, developers, engineers. What is the story here? Because it doesn't seem to just be about data. And the other part of this is, what happens to that money? Do creators, do content creators actually see that money? What's going to happen?
Yeah, that's an important question to ask. And I'll definitely spend some time talking about that. I think Microsoft, to your point earlier, has been very strategic in terms of acquisitions in the past. And when they acquired GitHub, that was brilliant, because with that came a massive developer community. And in the age of AI, that has served them really well. Microsoft also open sourced Visual Studio Code. And so the most popular code editor in the world today is owned by Microsoft, even though it's open source. And they also have the largest code repository online.
Yeah.
And so with AI, they have been able to really attract the developer community and service them really easily. And that means you're getting the talent to work on your models and to work with your APIs in a much easier sense than what Google has been able to do. Over the last year, you have seen Google really scamper to establish deals with similar providers. So they established a deal with Hugging Face, where they're hoping to garner some support with the open source AI community on Hugging Face. They're rolling out more integrations with their Colab product, and they're currently working on their own IDE called Project IDX. And so I think this relationship is not just about the data. The data is going to be super important for them to ground results in human generated and populated content, but it's also signaling, as you're saying, to the developer community that, hey, we value you, we value the content that you're creating, and we want that to be an integral part of the future of our AI platform. But the big question, who gets that money?
Yeah.
And what I'm looking forward to is some sort of revenue sharing model, similar to how creators on YouTube get cut off the advertising, with all these companies like Reddit and now Stack Overflow that will, in essence, license data that was created by their users. The question is, what is the user obligated to? If not a percentage of that, where's the incentive for them to continue creating content moving forward?
Yeah, very interesting. And the same could be said of what's going to happen. Automattic now also announcing that their platforms, WordPress and Tumblr, are in the mix with potential licensing deals with Midjourney, with OpenAI. Lots to see here. We've got a lot of content providers. Maybe even Google's going to come out with something associated with what's happening on YouTube. You mentioned that. You know, I think that we're at a crossroads here. This content is data. This content has to go somewhere. I had dinner with a CEO of a very large healthcare data company yesterday, and he was telling me that this is exactly what's happening in every sector. Is that like they're sitting on massive amounts of data. These learning models are expecting to be fed something. And so they are starting to experiment with that stuff and starting to find out on their own dime what it's going to look like when they start partnering with these bigger companies.
Exactly. And they have an insatiable appetite right now. The higher quality data, the better it is. And for data that they haven't been able to access by scraping the web, that will be super valuable for these platforms. I expect a lot of deal making to be happening over the coming months.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Elon Musk. He has decided that he wants to sue OpenAI essentially for, a betrayal, as he calls it, moving away from its kind of non-profit open source expectations to now something very different. Does he have a case? Is this a distraction? What should we think about this?
This is a story that I think will, regardless of the outcome, shape the future of AI and have repercussions all across the world. I remember the first time I came across the OpenAI name was reading a book called Life 3.0. And at that time, Elon was pushing OpenAI. He was a member of the board.
Right.
And there was this really ambitious goal of creating a company that was going to service humanity. And over the years, you really saw where OpenAI moved away from that initial governance structure to a more corporate structure. They had Microsoft invest $10 billion and now has exclusive access to their AI models. And you wonder if Elon has an argument here in that they had an initial agreement, they had an initial plan, and no, for everyone that believed in that dream, it really accounts to betrayal. Yeah. And when you think of the power of these technologies and tools, who should control them? Should a company with a 6-member board have exclusive control over a technology like this?
Yeah. It's definitely going to be worth watching. And I think, of course, depending on the ruling there, we'll see precedent, as you said, and that'll influence what happens next.
Exactly.
A couple more stories. One last one before we move to the money story, because we all love to talk about money. The controversy that we mentioned last week around the Gemini AI racial creations, the generative racial stuff that they created, that's still kind of percolating. Again, is this a real story or is this a distraction? Where are we with that?
It is a real story. It's an important story. But I do feel Google is being really unfairly pressured, especially by a lot of people claiming that this was deliberate to some extent and that it's about woke AI models. I really do think that Google really wanted to think through a way in which they could bring diversity within the content that they were generating, because we have seen issues with AI in the past with racial diversity issues. But I do understand that at the end of the day, Google has to hold themselves accountable for the high standards that they themselves have set. They have said, hey, you know what, we're red teaming our models. We're ensuring that we're practicing responsible AI development, and we ensure that we test these models before we put them out into the world.
Yeah.
When you put out models that have major flaws and inaccuracies like this, there are real world consequences to it. And I think it's important that the CEO is owning up to this. He's sending out a message to the company saying, hey, we need to maintain certain standards and we need to make these changes. And hopefully this is something that they can change in a couple of weeks. It's not a problem that you see as much in other models. So I don't imagine this is going to take them too long to fix and address. But it's a shame that Google lost so much momentum that they were starting to build up with their Gemini model with a controversy like this. It will be important for them to come back from this in a way where they can regain user trust, because once you lose that, it's super hard to get it back.
For sure. And of course, we have other questions, like if they get that wrong, if they're unable to test that before shipping it, what else are they getting wrong? So I think that's a fair assumption that this is a big story, but maybe not just because it's a racially connected or woke connected, but that it's actually like, how does this stuff get shipped? And what does testing look like?
And to that point, Richard, I want to point out one of the things that have been proposed is that there needs to be an external regulatory body to assess AI models, especially as they get more capable. And so we'll need to see how this also affects governance and policies like that in the future, when they see issues that big companies like Google are falling to, and how they'll adjust policy accordingly.
I'm a big fan as well. We regulate alcohol, we regulate smoking, we regulate cars. We make sure that children don't get in the way of this stuff. We make sure that it doesn't affect the young, those people that are in or unable to make these choices for themselves. I don't see how AI should be any different. Just like social media, somehow social media kind of found its way into the public without any regulation. I think that's a mistake. So I'm a fan of having, even age gates. I think that's a really good way. If you're 18, you can do this. If you're 21, you can do that. If you're 16, you can do these things. I think those things make perfect sense, and we should be able to use those same models for AI and for social media.
Agreed.
Cool. Let's flip our attention to money. A lot of money is rolling around in the AI space again. No crazy. That's not big news. But what's really interesting about this next one is that we're now moving just away from models, data models. We're actually moving into things that are quite tangible, and that's robotics. We saw a huge raise from Figure. Tell us a little bit more about that one.
Sure. At the beginning of the year, I was sharing on LinkedIn that I believe 2024 will be a massive year for robotics. You're starting to see breakout companies like 1X, like Figure. Of course, Tesla is working on their Optimus robots, and you have the giant in the room, Boston Dynamics. This week, you saw an announcement from Figure that they have inked a $675 million Series B from OpenAI, from Jeff Bezos, from NVIDIA. The who's who is investing in Figure, and that is massive. They're now a $2 billion company, way over $2 billion actually. But as a part of that, you also heard that OpenAI is partnering exclusively with Figure to develop language models for humanoid robots. And that is massive. One of the co-founders of OpenAI, in an interview a few weeks ago with Dorkesh, said they tried looking at robotics initially, and they ultimately gave up on it because they didn't have enough data, and it wasn't a great use of their resources at the time. And so for them to commit to Figure, it's a huge vote of confidence. I'm very excited for the team. I've looked at the progress that they have made over the last 18 months. Amazing. And we're going to continue seeing a lot more applied AI within things like robotics. And it's bound to change manufacturing, but also being available around the house in the next 10 years. It's likely that we will have humanoid robots within our households, just like we have a car. And that could be a very interesting future.
Yeah, very interesting. I've had a couple of meetings with VCs over the last couple of weeks, and they're all talking about this. They're all making very clear signals and decisions towards AI. So we're going to see a lot more of this. Couple more investments. We saw Photoroom raise some money. Let's give us the update on that one.
I am so excited for this product.
You like this one, don't you?
I do. I remember trying them a few months ago and then looking back at them this week, and it is a really great tool. If you're a marketer, if you own an e-commerce store and you need to put out assets, this tool makes it super easy to leverage generative AI in your workflow. There are a bunch of tools within the application that you just tap on. So you want to remove the background, it's just one click. You want to generate different backgrounds, it's just another click. You want to create a profile, it's just a click. And so they've found a way to abstract a lot of complex workflows.
You spoke to an entrepreneur this week about using this tool, right?
I did. She owns a massive e-commerce business, and she was looking at leveraging generative AI in her workflows. And we were talking about the different tools. Of course, using tools like Adobe and Midjourney, one, they're not necessarily integrated or they require very complex solutions and workloads. Photoroom, she discovered, she used it and she loved it. She loved the user experience. So great raise on their end. Looking forward to seeing how they continue to grow.
Chris, we also saw Baseimmune raise $11.3 million in a Series A. This is specifically for AI designed vaccines. Really, very, very interested to see how this evolves. So give us some idea of what we can expect from whatever an AI designed vaccine is.
Yeah, I've been very impressed by some of the AI startups coming out of Europe lately, especially out of France and the UK. Now, Baseimmune is out of London. What they're working on are synthetic antigen proteins that can provide much broader, longer-lasting immune responses and protection. Think of it like creating future-proof vaccines. That's amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing what they build.
Ideogram raised $80 million in a Series A. That's a pretty big A. And again, in the AI image generation space, a lot of people creating a lot of images. What is this one for?
You're right. There's so many generative image startups, but what makes Ideogram unique is that they've focused on specializing in legible text. And if you remember, a lot of the AI tools have struggled over the past in generating legible text, and Ideogram can write full-on sentences without an issue. In fact, the founders completed PhDs in that very specialty. The challenge for them, however, is that we've seen DALL-E 3, we have now seen Stable Diffusion 3 with the capabilities also to generate pretty good and legible text in their images. So is that enough of a differentiator anymore? Ideogram says yes. I'm not so sure. But either way, it's very exciting to see tools like Ideogram and to see the output that they can create. Now, one other context around what we're seeing is that up until now, a lot of the chips have been used for text generation with these large language models. And I think moving forward, we're going to see even more demand for chips to handle the graphics and the music and the video generation that is going to be coming. And so you can understand why numbers like 7 trillion have been thrown around, because of course, a lot of infrastructure will be needed to support the AI that we need for the future.
Chris, another incredible week. Each week we say this is going to be the big week. And of course, the next week proves us wrong. I can't wait to be proved wrong once again next week. For those of you who are watching, there's a couple of things you should be aware of. Chris is going to be creating more video content, which he will be sharing across all our channels. This is kind of bite-sized content. We're also going to be bringing in guests to interview them about specific industries. We're also going to be reminding you that the premium subscription for $100 a year will get you access to a lot more than just what you're seeing here. And if you want to go deeper, if your business or your role or your particular team is focused on AI, that's where you can get that in-depth analysis. So sign up on the website or contact us. We've also provided consulting services, coaching services, and facilitated workshops for our clients. So if you need some of those, give us a ring and let us know how we can help you.
What a week. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up to like this video or leave a comment below. And you can always subscribe to get notified whenever we drop a new video. Until next time, One love.